Part 80. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 791. A leisurely aura in the distance began to gradually spread. The leisurely aura forced all the people to move forward one after another, and then retreated crazily for a long time. Then I saw a man standing in front of the 6 guardians. The man stood with his hands behind his back, a gloomy expression flashed across his face, and the indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. "Stand up." At this moment, a lingering aura began to spread out from the void quietly. Then they saw Lin Yu's space-time beast descending in front of them. When the 6 guardians saw Lin Yu at first, they didn't take the reign too seriously. However, when the 6 guardians saw the space-time beast next to Lin Yu, their expressions almost changed. Suddenly it started to look ugly. The 6 guardians looked at each other in confusion, their eyes fixed on Lin Yu, and then they couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then forcibly stabilized their minds. "How is that possible? How did you discover our whereabouts?" At this time, the eyes of the 6 guardians were fixed on Lin Yu, their expressions full of indifference, and their brows full of confusion. An awe-inspiring aura gradually began to spread, and then Lin Yu was seen walking forward unhurriedly, taking a step forward. "You don't need to know how I discovered you, but now you just need to know that you will die now." At this time, the strong sense of oppression on Lin Yu's body was completely released almost at that moment. Under that strong sense of oppression, the 6 guardians of the White Lotus sect also they couldn't help but look at each other in confusion. At this moment, their eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and then they snorted coldly. "Humph, boy, you know that all those who are too arrogant will die. I don't see many arrogant boys like you, but arrogant boys like you usually don't live long." At this time, the 6 guardians of the White Lotus sect opened their eyes angrily, staring at Lin Yu, and the surging murderous aura was completely released in an instant. At this time, they were approaching Lin Yu step by step, their expressions full of gloom and coldness. At this time, the 6 White Lotus sect protectors suddenly gathered all the surging murderous intentions in themselves into one place almost at this moment. That faint aura forced everyone's expressions to begin to look increasingly ugly. But at this moment, not far away, a faint breath quietly gathered. At this time, Lin Yu glanced at Ye Lingyu beside him. "How about it? How about I let you practice my skills now?" Lin Yu stared at Ye Lingyu with a smile on his face, and the faint smile at the corner of his mouth began to become more obvious. After Ye Lingyu heard what Lin Yu said, he was slightly stunned at first, but he accepted it readily the next second. Ye Lingyu just took a step forward unhurriedly, then raised his head and glanced up and down in their direction. Ye Lingyu's expression was completely gloomy and cold, and then he made a hand gesture, and then the ice crystal phoenix bird suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The power of the ice crystal phoenix bird was extremely ruthless, and the surging power was completely released almost at that moment. The sharp energy contained in the ice crystal phoenix bird was released without reservation almost in an instant. You must know that the ice crystal phoenix bird has a source of ice in its body. After the 6 guardians saw the ice crystal phoenix bird, their faces instantly turned ugly. You must know that this human beast master is a bit more powerful than them. What's more, this ice crystal phoenix bird is a god-level beast, and I am afraid that there is only one step left to be promoted to the God King level. This with their current strength, they simply cannot deal with alien beasts of this level. When the 6 guardians saw this scene, their expressions were full of indifference, and then their eyes became fixed on the ice crystal phoenix bird, and then they with such angry eyes and a somewhat indifferent murderous intent, he was released without reservation almost at that moment. "Boy, now it means that you must be stubborn and your path will become dark, right?" The eyes of the 6 guardians were fixed on Lin Yu's murderous aura, and they were completely released almost at that moment. After Lin Yu saw this scene, the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and then he gradually approached them step by step, with a calm murderous intention, and at the same time, it is a complete release. Damn it, since you have made such a plan today, then I really should fulfill your request today. For me, if you want to seek death, it will be very simple for me to fulfill your request. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, and then completely revealed his murderous intent. When Ye Lingyu saw Lin Yu like this, he rolled his eyes at Lin Yu, and then said in a deep voice, "Now they don't need you to do it, I can do it myself." Ye Lingyu turned his head and glanced at Lin Yu with a smile on his face, and the faint smile on the corner of his mouth became more obvious. After hearing what Ye Lingyu said, Lin Yu was also slightly stunned at first, and then he coughed lightly and said softly, "Okay, let the Ice Crystal Phoenix practice." At this time, Lin Yu controlled the time and space hand to completely block the surrounding space. Then he saw the Ice Crystal Phoenix, madly attacking the 6 guardians again. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 792. You must know that the Ice Crystal Phoenix bird had already sent out a stream of ice before, and the 6 guardians were close to their full strength, and they could barely resist it. Now, the Ice Crystal Phoenix bird is attacking them again. The guardians looked at each other, their expressions suddenly turned ugly, and then their brows seemed to be knitted together. This guy has completely blocked the space around here. Now he obviously wants to kill us completely before he gives up. This must not be the case. After the Great Protector finished speaking, he turned his head and glanced towards them. After the other people heard what the Great Protector said, they also looked at each other. At this time, they had no idea at all. How should we resolve the current situation? Brother, I'm afraid we brothers are going to fall into trouble here today, but it makes me feel uneasy to fall into trouble in the hands of these 2 juniors. At this time, the second protector said in a deep voice. After the Great Protector heard what the second protector said, he turned around, looked at them up and down, and said helplessly, "Based on the current situation, we want to start the trouble from them. It would be a bit difficult to escape unscathed like this." At this time, the Great Protector said helplessly, with a trace of indifference flashing across his expression, and his whole face began to look a little tangled. But at this moment, the Ice Crystal Phoenix bird didn't give them any chance to breathe at all, and spat out several mouthfuls of ice streams from its mouth. In the end, the Great Protector couldn't help it anymore. At this time, his entire face suddenly became ugly, and then he turned his head and glanced at his brothers, and then he said in a cold voice, "Now, I can only feel sorry for my brothers." After the Great Protector finished speaking, he immediately locked the situation with his hands, and then a blood-red aura condensed from his palms. That blood-red aura directly enveloped the other 5 people completely. The other 5 people didn't even have time to react, and then they were completely enveloped by the vast aura of the Great Protector. At this moment, the face of the Great Protector suddenly became ferocious, and a strong murderous intention began to be released from the body of the Great Protector without reservation. Brothers, I will definitely avenge you. I will gladly accept your skills today. After the Great Protector finished speaking, he saw the image above his head, and suddenly a bloody lotus appeared. The bloody lotus rushed towards Ye Lingyu in an instant. The bloody lotus came towards Ye Lingyu's face, forcing Ye Lingyu to involuntarily move towards Ye Lingyu at that time. The back was so crazy of retreating. At this time, Ye Lingyu looked at the lotus that was following him like a shadow. He had no intention of letting him go. His face instantly became ugly, and then he turned around and said viciously. He glared at Lin Yu. "Save me quickly." At this time, Lin Yu heard Ye Lingyu, and after saying this, he just shook his head, and then a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Actually, the Ice Crystal Phoenix bird is enough to protect you, but why don't you believe in the strength of the Ice Crystal Phoenix bird?" At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, The ice crystal yellow bird turned its head, its eyes fixed on Lin Yu's body, and an awe-inspiring murderous aura came out almost at that moment. Released, after the blood-colored lotus pods collided with each other, the ice crystal phoenix bird transformed and flew backwards. Lingyu was already seriously injured when he saw the ice crystal phoenix bird in front of him. At that moment, his face couldn't help but become slightly ugly, and then a hint of indifference flashed across his expression. "Are you satisfied now? This little guy is now seriously injured. I'm afraid it will take some time to recover in the future." After Lin Yu heard what Lingyu said, he couldn't help but shake his head. In the end, he just controlled the space-time beast and closed his palms so gently. At this time, I saw that the space around the Great Protector instantly condensed into a ball. The Great Protector's face suddenly turned ugly. His expression was full of disbelief, and his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. "Boy, I didn't expect you to have such strength. I really saw it today." At this time, that space was desperately squeezing towards the Great Protector like this. After the Great Protector saw this scene, although his face was a little ugly, he just let out an angry roar, and then he saw that space completely explode like this. That area of space was directly shattered, and the snow lotus above the head of the Great Protector became more and more obvious. And at this moment, outside the Baiko forest, after Lu Changqing felt the unique aura fluctuations on the Great Protector, his expression sank slightly at first, and then he calmed down so lightly in the next second. He rubbed his chin. "Interesting, that aura is really mysterious. I don't know who emits this aura." At this time, Lu Changqing was talking leisurely. After Huangrenji heard what Lu Changqing said, she appeared next to Lu Changqing in the next second, staring at Lu Changqing with a smile on her face, and a bit of amusement in her eyes. "I don't know, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now that those guys have been chasing us for so long, it seems we should teach them a lesson." At this time, Huangrenji was talking leisurely, and the faint smile at the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after Lu Changqing heard Huangrenji's words, the look on his face was also slightly condensed, and he gently touched his chin. "What you said is indeed true. The enemy of your enemy is your friend. No matter who is suffering now, we should really help now." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 793. At this time, Lin Yu never thought that Balian Zuoshi could actually have such terrifying strength. At this moment, he was standing in the distance, his expression condensed, and a rare dignity flashed across his face. Meaning? Oops, judging from the current situation, after that guy devoured the souls of several of his brothers, his current strength may be hard for even me to resist. When Lin Yu thought of this, his face suddenly turned ugly. And just after this moment, the mysterious aura went straight up into the sky, and then the holy fire Kylin and the red-trained yellow sand beast were seen jumping out of a huge magic circle at the same time. Out. Lin Yu's amplifying array was indeed much stronger. At this time, Ling Yu, who was standing aside, saw Lin Yu releasing these three god-level beasts at the same time, and then he began to realize that something was wrong. Ling Yu turned his head and glanced at Lin Yu, and then said softly, "Now you are not sure that you can kill this guy." At this time, when Lin Yu heard what Ling Yu said, he was slightly startled at first. The next second, he nodded gently, with a hint of indifference flashing across his expression, and there was quite a bit of indifference between his eyebrows. There was a bit of helplessness. "Well, although I'm not so sure, it's absolutely impossible for this guy to escape from my hands. Just leave this matter to me." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he immediately took a step forward, and then a calm murderous aura in his body was completely released almost at that moment. Then he controlled the space-time beast with his mind and used the time-space barrier. Then he drove the fire unicorn and used the unicorn holy fire. Then he saw the red-trained yellow sand beast in the void. A wind of war spewed out from my mouth. At this time, all the auras around here converged into one place, and that lingering aura completely forced everyone back. A vast force instantly snaked up, and then immediately above the 9 heavens, a roiling blood energy surged up and down. The great protector in the distance was shocked after seeing this scene. His expression was stunned, and a rare look of a police officer flashed across his face. At this time, his speaking voice could not help but tremble slightly. How is it possible? How could your boy's strength be so terrifying? This is absolutely impossible. The great protector's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and then a hint of indifferent murderous intent flashed across his eyes. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what the great protector said, he slowly raised his steps and approached the great protector step by step. My horror is beyond your imagination. The faint murderous aura in Lin Yu's body made the great protector even more nervous, and his whole body could not help but start to tremble. The great protector moved forward one after another, and then retreated several steps before finally stopping his body. However, the snow lotus above the great protector's head was completely released at that moment, and then he saw a vast energy, which instantly moved towards Lin Yu's body and began to wrap around him crazily. The strong force forced everyone to retreat so crazily. At this time, Lin Yu just stopped Lin Yu's slender waist and galloped behind him. As for the skills Lin Yu had just used, others were completely wiped out almost instantly. After Lin Yu saw this scene, his whole expression became a little uncomfortable. At this time, he took a deep breath, and then forcibly calmed his mood. How is it possible? This power is too terrifying. How could it be like this? Lin Yu gently rubbed his chin, and then said in a cold voice, with a somewhat puzzled expression between his brows, and a hint of indifference flashing through his expression. And at this moment, others saw that in the void, masses of breath exploded, and the surrounding space was filled with the smell of blood. The smell of blood was pervasive towards Lin Yu, surrounding him like this. Come over. At this moment, after Lu Changqing saw the moves used by the great protector in the void, he could not help but be shocked and dumbfounded. Something flashed in his eyes, and it was hard to believe. Believe it or not, a layer of dense cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Lu Linglong also felt the power of the snow lotus of the white lotus section at this moment. Lu Linglong's entire expression began to become ugly at that moment. How is it possible? The 6 guardians of the white lotus sect probably shouldn't be that strong together. But how could that aura be so terrifying now? At this time, Lu Linglong just said in a deep voice, with a bit of helplessness flashing across her expression, and a bit of indifference flashing between her eyebrows. At this time, after hearing what Lu Linglong said, Lu Changqing couldn't help but gently spread out the folding fan in his hand, and a bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. That's not necessarily true. Don't forget that the 6 guardians are brothers from the same mother. After hearing what Lu Changqing said, Lu Linglong suddenly smiled, and a cold sneer appeared on the corner of her mouth. Then others snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, what if they are brothers from the same mother? After hearing what Lu Linglong said, 3 black lines appeared on Lu Changqing's forehead, and he was speechless in his heart. He just shook his head. Alas, don't forget that there is a skill in the White Lotus sect called the Blood Lotus technique. The Blood Lotus technique can devour the closest relatives, and half of their strength will be fused into the body of the caster. At this time, Lu Changqing said helplessly, with a bit of helplessness on his face. At this time, after hearing what Lu Changqing said, Lu Linglong's expression couldn't help but freeze. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 794. After Huang Renjie, Lu Linglong, and several other women saw this scene, a bit of helplessness flashed across their expressions, and then they turned their heads, looked at Lu Changqing up and down, and said leisurely, "Then what should we do now?" When Lu Changqing heard what they said, he couldn't help but rub his chin gently. After thinking for a moment, he said in a deep voice, "Now we have no choice but to take action. If we don't take action, I'm afraid that when the brother is killed by this guy, we will be in even greater trouble." Of course Lu Changqing understood the truth behind the cold lips, so he was ready to help. After Lu Linglong heard what Lu Changqing said, she nodded slightly. "Okay, if that's the case, then I'll take action too." At this time, Lu Changqing jumped up directly after speaking, and then immediately behind him, a golden-winged roc suddenly jumped up. When the golden-winged roc appeared in this world, a sense of oppression arose spontaneously. At this time, after seeing the golden-winged roc in the distance, Lu Linglong was shocked and dumbfounded. Her eyes were fixed on Lu Changqing, her expression full of awe. Kind of indifferent. How is that possible? This golden-winged roc has already fallen into your hands. At this time, Lu Linglong's voice was slightly trembling, and a bit of disbelief flashed across her face. At this time, after Lu Changqing heard what Lu Linglong said, he couldn't help but cough lightly. Ahem, indeed, it was just a coincidence that I conquered this guy by accident. Now it just happens to come in handy. After Lu Changqing finished speaking, he ordered the golden-winged roc to gallop towards the snow lotus in the void without saying a word. At this time, the Great Protector also felt the aura of Lu Changqing and the golden-winged roc, and his expression flashed a bit of gloom. At this time, I saw the Great Protector laughing loudly, as if he was completely crazy, and his expression was full of contempt. "Ha ha ha, boy, there is a way to heaven. If you don't go to hell, there is no way. You have to go to hell. Now that you want to die so much, and you have already been sent to your door, it would be really unreasonable if I don't help you now." After the Great Protector finished speaking, he saw a faint blood energy released from the snow lotus, transforming into a giant claw towards the golden wing, and Daipen grabbed it directly. Obviously, Lu Changqing still underestimated this Great Protector. At first, Lin Yu thought that Lu Changqing could help him first and help him escape from this guy's shackles. But when Lin Yu saw this scene, his whole expression couldn't help but become slightly ugly. He just such a soft sigh. "Oh, there is nothing I can do. I didn't expect this guy to be in such a mess now. What should I do?" At this time, Lin Yu just said helplessly, with a faint bitter smile on the corner of his mouth. At this time, the golden-winged roc was fluttering its wings desperately. At this time, Lu Changqing almost met him and was caught in the palm of the Great Protector. The Great Protector stood there laughing at this moment, as if he was completely crazy and looked extremely arrogant. At this moment, after Lu Linglong saw that Lu Changqing was under control, a rare dignified expression flashed across her face, and then she was ready to save Lu Changqing. After all, Lu Linglong is also the head catcher of the warden, so she is quite confident in her own strength. But before Lu Linglong could take action, Huang Renjie stopped Lu Linglong. At this time, when Lu Linglong saw Huang Renjie stopping her, a bit of solemnity flashed across her face, and then she turned her head and glanced at Huang Renjie. "What do you mean?" At this time, after seeing Lu Linglong like this, Huang Renjie just sighed softly. "Oh, even that guy was subdued with one move when he went up. Now, what do you think our chances of winning are if we go rashly?" Huang Renjie's eyes were fixed directly on Lu Linglong, and then she said helplessly. After Lu Linglong heard what Huang Renjie said, something strange flashed across her expression, and then Lu Linglong turned her head and glanced at Huang Renjie. "Then what do you mean by this? Is it possible that you just want to die without saving me now?" At this time, Lu Linglong's voice was a little low. Huang Renjie heard it. After Lu Linglong said this, She couldn't help but rub her chin so gently, and then she sighed softly. Oh, it's best to discuss this matter in the long run. At this time, Huang Renji turned her head, staring directly at Lu Linglong, and then she said helplessly. At this time, Lin Yu looked around, and then fixed his gaze on Ye Lingyu. Now that there is no other choice but you, are you going to continue to hide your strength? Lin Yu turned his head and stared at Ye Lingyu. His eyes flashed with a bit of complexity, and then he sighed. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ye Lingyu's expression flashed a bit of indifference, and then he gently pushed Lin Yu away. I didn't expect you to be such a waste, and in the end I still have to rely on myself. Even though Ye Lingyu said this, Lin Yu didn't seem angry at all. After hearing what Ye Lingyu said, Lin Yu just smiled a little, and then he spoke leisurely. That's not necessarily true. Ye Lingyu raised his eyebrows slightly, and then stared at Lin Yu with a smile on his face, with a bit of playfulness in his expression. Interesting, that is to say, do you have other means now? After Ye Lingyu realized this, he knew that he was probably fooled by Lin Yu this time. At this time, Lin Yu just smiled. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Cheng. Chapter 795. Of course, but it's just you. At this time, Lin Yu was staring at Ye Lingyu with a smile on his face, a bit of amusement on his face. At this time, 3 black lines appeared on Ye Lingyu's forehead in an instant, and he was naturally speechless for a while. Lin Yu naturally has great faith in the strength of Ye Lingyu's personality. You must know that the ice crystal phoenix bird was so difficult to deal with at first, but this time Ye Lingyu only defeated the ice crystal phoenix bird so completely in just a moment. This shows how terrifying Ye Lingyu's strength is. When Lin Yu thought of this, he gently touched his chin, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Lin Yu's smile at this moment was noticed by Ye Lingyu, and he knew at that time that he was completely plotted by the man in front of him. A hint of icy blue flashed across Ye Lingyu's eyes. At this moment, the blood surrounding them completely condensed into ice. A moment later, that mysterious force spread quietly into the void almost at that moment, and then immediately after that, a light blue aura was seen hovering around it. And out. That lightness. The blue aura forced everyone to pull back suddenly. At this moment, after everyone saw this scene, their expressions were full of disbelief. That mysterious aura condensed into one in an instant. Even though the Great Protector had just absorbed a lot of power from these guys, at this second, the Great Protector was instantly aware of the strong murderous intention displayed by Ye Lingyu. After the Great Protector retreated back for a long time, he finally managed to stand firm. Then, the look of the Great Protector was filled with gloominess, and a light blue aura rose into the sky. It started to wrap around the Great Protector's body. The Great Protector raised his head and looked at the snow lotus in the sky. After glancing up and down, he just felt that there was a few breaths on the snow lotus, which seemed to be absent, and even called the Great Protector, which was a little unclear. After seeing this scene, the Great Protector couldn't help but start to look slightly ugly. At this time, he gently rubbed his chin, and the corners of his mouth were even more raised. A faint smile. Interesting, this breath is really interesting, I really didn't expect it. After the Great Protector finished speaking, you suddenly flew forward and took a step forward, and then held a stream of ice blue breath with both hands, wrapping up and down from the Great Protector's body. Come on, that ice blue aura makes everyone's souls tremble. Then, he saw the Great Protector flying into the sky, standing tall in the void, looking down at the world, looking down upon the heroes, and even more aura of domination. The Great Protector stood in the void, looking down at everyone with an indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth, and then said in a cold voice, "Although your strength is not weak, I'm afraid you are still a little behind now. I am here today, and none of you can leave." Lu Changqing struggled desperately, but at this time Lu Changqing obviously overestimated his own strength. At this time, the Great Protector saw Lu Changqing, and after struggling desperately, he just snorted coldly, and then said in a deep voice, "Boy, you dare to be so arrogant now, I will definitely kill you today." After the Great Protector finished speaking, he suddenly closed his hands and most of the power on Lu Changqing was absorbed almost in that instant. After Huang Renjie and Lu Linglong saw this scene, their expressions couldn't help but condense, and then they subconsciously wanted to go and save Lu Changqing. But at this time, the Great Protector seemed to have noticed. The two men just had a faint sneer at the corners of their mouths, and then their expressions were filled with a gloomy and turbid air, and they turned toward them in an instant. People here suddenly came over, and the turbid aura surrounded the two of them, making it impossible for the two of them to struggle. The corner of the Great Protector's mouth only evoked a somewhat indifferent sneer, with a hint of coldness flashing through his expression, and a completely gloomy look between his brows. "Damn it, you deserve to be killed. Since you are so ignorant of the heaven and earth, it would really be unjustifiable if I didn't kill you today." After the Great Protector finished speaking, he waved out a stream of turbid air from his sleeves without saying a word, and then immediately wrapped up Lu Linglong and Huang Renjie in this way. The Great Protector was filled with murderous aura at this moment, and his murderous intention was overwhelming. After seeing this scene, everyone around them was completely frightened by the turbid aura of the Great Protector. At this time, the two of them looked at each other, their expressions full of fear. How is it possible? This power is probably a bit unbelievable. At this moment, Ye Lingyu seemed to suddenly understand something. The corner of Ye Lingyu's mouth evoked a faint smile, and his face was filled with a look of disdain. "They are just trash. I don't know who gave you the courage." Ye Lingyu's expression at this time was full of indifference. The faint murderous aura on his body was almost completely released in that instant. Then, he suddenly condensed the frost power around the body of the Great Protector. The Great Protector felt the frost power that was madly squeezing towards him. He was shocked and retreated madly in the next second. The Great Protector retreated continuously. After retreating for a long time, he barely stabilized his body. At this time, he stared at Ye Lingyu with his eyes wide open. A faint murderous aura almost spread completely. "Asshole, you deserve to die." After hearing what the Great Protector said, Ye Lingyu just curled up a sneer at the corner of his mouth. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 796. Really? But I'm always afraid that you don't have the strength. Are you sure you can really do anything to me? At this time, Ye Lingyu gradually approached the Great Protector with a cold smile on his face. A sense of coldness spread quietly from Ye Lingyu's body, forcing the Great Protector to retreat to the back for a long time before he could barely stabilize his body. At this time, the Great Protector's face suddenly became ugly. At this time, she couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then she forced herself to calm down. What do you want to do? After the Great Protector retreated to the back for a long time, he finally stood firm here. At this time, he was trembling all over, and his face became completely ugly in an instant. Ye Lingyu saw the Great Protector, and after that, he just raised a cold smile at the corner of his mouth, and then he walked slowly towards the Great Protector and moved here. After seeing this scene, the Great Protector's expression became completely ugly almost at that moment. Although everyone knew that Ye Lingyu's strength was not weak, they never thought that Ye Lingyu's strength would be so terrible. At this time, Lingyu, who was far away, saw this scene, and the smile on the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious, and then he nodded with satisfaction, and his expression was quite indifferent. At this moment, Lu Changqing never thought that Ye Lingyu's strength would be so terrible. Lu Changqing subconsciously retreated a few steps to the back so frantically. At this time, Lu Changqing was also shocked and stunned. How is it possible? What is the identity of this woman? I always feel that this woman is not as simple as she seems on the surface. Lu Changqing just said so tremblingly, his face full of helplessness, and a faint bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. And at this moment, a mysterious power rushed straight to the sky, and the dangling power completely exploded on the snow lotus. The moment the snow lotus exploded, an unprecedented power broke out. That chaotic and vast power made everyone's mind start to become nervous at that moment. At this time, Lu Changqing retreated several steps to the back before he could barely stabilize his body. At this time, Lu Changqing's eyes were fixed on everything happening in front of him, and his whole expression was full of indifference. Strange, how could that power be so strange? There is a problem, this power is definitely problematic. At this time, Lu Changqing said helplessly, with a faint bitter smile on his lips. After a while, he saw a group of vast air, which almost completely gathered on everyone's body at that moment. But it was only a moment, and the whole person of the Great Protector was instantly swallowed up by the blood. At this time, everyone's eyes were fixed on the Great Protector, and the expressions of those people were full of disbelief. The strength of this Great Protector is really hard to figure out now. Looking at the blood emanating from his body, it is obviously extraordinary, but that power does not seem to be his. After seeing this scene, everyone's expression flashed a bit of puzzlement, and those people looked at each other, with a kind of surprise between their eyebrows. Almost in that instant, a breath of indifference suddenly appeared. Then, the frost that was hanging around the Great Protector exploded completely in that instant. Then, the Great Protector was seen, with a look of indifference. At this time, the Great Protector slowly walked forward step by step. The aura of the Great Protector was completely different from before. After seeing the aura of the Great Protector, Lin Yu always felt familiar, but as for where it was familiar, even Lin Yu himself was not quite clear. After waiting for this moment, a bit of embarrassment flashed across Lin Yu's face, and then his face suddenly twisted. Oh no, be careful, this guy's strength is extraordinary, if you are not careful, you will be doomed. Lin Yu's voice was already a bit hysterical. But at this time, Ye Lingyu didn't seem to take Lin Yu's words to heart. The corners of Ye Lingyu's mouth just raised a faint smile, and then he waved his hand lightly. Don't worry, I know how to deal with this matter, and you don't need to worry. But as soon as Ye Lingyu finished speaking, the next second, others saw that a strong and domineering aura was coming towards them. That aura seemed to want to completely swallow Ye Lingyu. At this time, Ye Lingyu was shocked and stunned. She never thought that this power would be so terrible. Ye Lingyu sat there in a daze. At this time, Lin Yu saw the scene from a distance. He didn't dare to hesitate for a moment and rushed towards Ye Lingyu. He came directly to Ye Lingyu, and then suddenly hugged Ye Lingyu in his arms, and then used his body to release a space barrier to forcibly block the attack. After seeing this scene, Ye Lingyu was shocked and stunned. Ye Lingyu looked at Lin Yu at this time and was stunned. Why? Why did you do this? Are you a fool? At this time, Lin Yu forced a faint smile from the corner of his mouth, and then reached out his hand and touched Ye Lingyu's face, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 797. It doesn't matter, I can't do anything to this guy. And at this moment, when the Great Protector saw Lin Yu acting like this, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. Then, as if he had seen the funniest joke in the world, he laughed wildly and looked towards Lin Yu's eyes were full of indifference. Ha ha ha, I said you are too stupid. You actually dare to use your mortal body to block my attack. I think you are simply impatient. At this time, the Great Protector suddenly stepped forward, and then gradually moved towards Lin Yu, approaching him. A somewhat indifferent murderous aura and a cold feeling surged from that great body. This is how things started to appear on the Protector's body. The Great Protector's eyes widened with anger, and a faint trace of blood appeared on his body. At this moment, Lu Changqing felt as if the spiritual power in his body had been completely absorbed by someone at almost this moment. At this time, Lu Changqing's face was slightly ugly, and his expression was full of helplessness. "Brother, please do it quickly." When Lin Yu saw this scene, a hint of indifferent gloom flashed across his expression, and then he laughed loudly. "Originally, I thought that maybe I should give this guy some escape route, but now it seems that this guy deserves to die. I might as well make him pay the price today." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly waved his hand, and then he saw the space beast, and suddenly a fatal roar came out of his mouth. Then, in the mouth of the time and space beast, it spat out a mouthful of a pitch-black ball. At this time, you can see that your little ball can even be swallowed by light. Wherever that little ball goes, that area of space instantly changed and was completely divided by the small ball. After everyone saw this scene, they were shocked and dumbfounded. At this time, they looked at each other, and their eyes towards Lin Yu were filled with an unbelievable look. Those people were just stunned at this moment. Land. At this time, Lin Yu's expression was completely indifferent, and there was a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth. There was a gloomy look between his eyebrows, and there was an indifferent murderous aura, almost at that moment. In an instant, there was such a complete release. At this time, Lin Yu jumped up like this, but for just a moment, he stood on the sky. At this time, Lin Yu stepped on the top of the space-time beast, and he was condescending. "It's like he is the master of this space. How's it going? I wonder if you're still satisfied with me looking like this." At this time, Lin Yu's expression was indifferent, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. His eyes looked at them as if he was looking at some trash with pity. At this time, everyone just looked at each other. At this time, they were stunned and really didn't know what to do. At this time, he saw a person not far away and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. At this time, Lin Yu leaned forward and lowered his head. With just a wave of his hand, a violent and churning force forced everyone to retreat one after another. A surge of murderous intent made everyone's hearts tremble almost at that moment. Lin Yu slowly moved forward, pacing step by step. At this time, the indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. "Originally, this was a move prepared for you, the leader of the White Lotus sect, but now it seems that I have no choice but to attack you first. You can't blame me for all this. I can only blame you for seeking death yourself." At this time, Lin Yu was so condescending that he was like a vast and smoky king, making everyone's hearts tremble. The Great Protector was completely swallowed up by the ball of light. At this time, he became the Great Protector. After being swallowed up, the snow lotus in the void was crumbling, and then in just a moment, the scene fell directly into Lin Yu's palm. At this time, Lin Yu looked at the ball of snow lotus in his palm. After looking up and down for a long time, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. A look of satisfaction flashed across his face, and even more at the corner of his mouth. It evoked a faint smile. "Yes, it is indeed the treasure of the White Lotus sect, and it is indeed extraordinary. It is really good to see it today." At this time, Ye Lingyu was standing in the distance, and he was also shocked and dumbfounded. Ye Lingyu just swallowed, and then looked at Lin Yu, his eyes filled with disbelief. "How is that possible? You?" Ye Lingyu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and then his voice even trembled slightly as he spoke. At this time, Lin Yu was staring at Ye Lingyu with a smile on his face, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "How?" At this time, Ye Lingyu was here. After hearing what Lin Yu said, A trace of complexity flashed across his expression, and then a bit of surprise flashed across his face. Terrible, you are too scary. Lin Yu gently rubbed Ye Lingyu's little head, with a bit of doting flashing in his eyes. Really? But I don't think so. Although this move is very easy to deal with this guy, it is not as easy as it is now to deal with the guy from the White Lotus sect. Lin Yu's face looked a little gloomy. At this time, he couldn't help but sigh, and a faint bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ye Lingyu's expression flashed with some complexity, and a strange light flashed between his eyebrows. How about you come with me to Atlantis this time after you get out of here? At this time, Lin Yu looked eager when he saw Ye Lingyu's little girl. He just hesitated for a moment, and then the next second, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. If that's what you want, of course there's nothing wrong with that. At this time, Lin Yu was speaking softly and unhurriedly, with a smile on his lips. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 798. At this time, Lu Changqing was also completely shocked by the scene he had seen before. He took a deep breath, then forcibly calmed down his mood, and then turned his head. He came and looked Lin Yu up and down. At this moment, Lu Changqing was thinking, the person in front of me is by no means an ordinary person. If we can establish a good relationship with him now, it will definitely be a good thing in the future. At this time, after Lu Changqing thought of this, he walked slowly towards Lin Yu. Then when he came to Lin Yu, he clasped his fists towards Lin Yu and spoke at the corners of his mouth. It evoked a smile. Brother, I wonder why this brother came to Baiko Forest this time. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Lu Changqing said, he just turned his head and glanced up and down at Lu Changqing, and then said softly, to be honest, I am here to find a medicinal herb. After Lu Changqing heard what Lin Yu said, a bit of confusion flashed across his face, and then he turned his head and looked Lin Yu up and down. At the corner of his mouth, it even evoked a somewhat indifferent smile. I just don't know what kind of herbs my brother wants this time. Lu Changqing's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this time, Lin Yu just coughed lightly. Ahem, the medicinal material I am looking for is indeed a bit weird, so I won't mention it. At this time, Lin Yu just spoke softly and unhurriedly, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. And Lu Changqing naturally understood that Lin Yu just didn't want to tell him. After Lu Changqing saw this scene, he couldn't help but cough lightly. Ahem, the thing is like this, in fact, deep in the Baiko Forest, a secret realm has been opened. That secret realm there may be something that Xiantai is looking for. At this time, Lu Changqing spoke in such a leisurely manner, with a faint smile on his lips, and turned his head, staring directly at Lin Yu. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Lu Changqing said, a bit of indifference flashed across his expression, and then his eyes stared straight at Lu Changqing, with a hint of indifference in his expression. Extremely rare solemnity. What? Are you telling the truth? At this time, Lu Changqing heard Lin Yu. After saying this, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he coughed lightly, and then nodded. Ahem, maybe it's just a possibility. As for what this matter is, I don't know exactly. After Lin Yu heard what Lu Changqing said, his originally shining eyes suddenly dimmed. At this time, the voice of the space-time beast sounded in Lin Yu's mind. Judging from the current situation, going to this secret realm may not necessarily be a bad thing. At this time, when Lin Yu heard the words of the space-time beast, a bit of helplessness flashed in his eyes, and then he nodded gently. What you said is indeed true, then you might as well go and have a look in this secret realm. When Lin Yu thought of this, a faint smile appeared at the corners of his mouth, and there was quite a bit of amusement in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, in this secret realm, After Chen Qian and others saw this scene, their expressions were full of fear, and their faces were full of helplessness. At this moment, Chen Qian couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then calmed down his mood. His face was full of helplessness, and then a bit of complexity flashed through his expression. It's better to be careful here. I don't know why I always have a bad feeling now. At this time, Chen Qian said helplessly, and then he sighed for a long time, with a rare flash of panic in his expression. After everyone heard what Chen Qian said, they couldn't help but look at each other, and then they all turned their heads and looked at Chen Qian up and down, and then spoke softly. What on earth is about to happen? Do you know this? Everyone's eyes were fixed on Chen Qian, and then their expressions were full of confusion. They had no idea what Chen Qian meant by his words. After Chen Qian heard everyone's inquiries, he just pointed towards the secret realm not far away. It seems to be right in front. I always feel that there is an extremely powerful force in front of me that is about to burst out and is crumbling, but I hope what I am thinking is just a temporary illusion. All the people looked in the direction of Chen Qian's finger. Their expressions were full of curiosity. At this moment, I saw a person coming directly to Chen Qian, and then gently patted Chen Qian on the shoulder, with a faint smile on his lips. Don't worry, there shouldn't be anything ahead. The ice goddess stared at Chen Qian with a smile on her face, and then she spoke leisurely and leisurely. At this time, Chen Qian shook his head after hearing what the holy ice goddess said, and then the next second, his expression could not help but freeze. No, listen to me, we'd better not go over there. Once we go over there, we might really be left there forever. At this time, Chen Qian said so decisively, and a trace of determination flashed across his face. At this time, the holy ice goddess, on the contrary, had a completely opposite attitude. The holy ice goddess turned her head, looked up and down at Chen Qian, and then coughed lightly. Ahem, not necessarily, believe me, I can do it. After saying this, the holy ice goddess turned her head and stared at Chen Qian with a smile on her face, and then spoke slowly and softly. At this time, Chen Qian just felt that the holy ice goddess might be a little strange. As for what was strange, even Chen Qian couldn't tell for a while. At this moment, Chen Qian's expression could not help but freeze. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 799. Are you sure? Is there really nothing wrong with this? Chen Qian's eyes were fixed directly on the ice goddess, and then the two people looked at each other, and a burst of fierce sparks burst out in the air. At this time, the air between the two people, it was as if it was frozen. At this time, the ice goddess suddenly smiled. A faint smile appeared on the ice goddess' face, and then she waved her hand gently. What? You doubt me? At this time, the attitude of the ice goddess was completely opposite to that before. Everyone was completely confused as to why the ice goddess was like this now. And at that moment, a ball of vast aura came towards them. The ball of awe-inspiring aura blew towards Chen Qian's face. Forcing him, Chen Qian retreated one after another. After several steps, he managed to stabilize his body. At this time, Chen Qian couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then calmed down his mood slightly. His whole expression was full of disbelief. But just after that moment, I saw a faint aura rising into the sky around here, and then a domineering force around here, quietly and crazily all around. Spread in circles. Chen Qian took several steps back in succession before he managed to stabilize his body. Then he took a deep breath, and then his mood was regarded as reluctant. The ground calmed down like this. After Chen Qian looked around, he shook his head. No, there's something wrong. At this time, Chen Xian said in a deep voice, and then he held his breath and concentrated his energy, and the energy in his dantian gathered in Zifu. The balls of leisurely energy completely exploded almost at this moment. The faint aura of tranquility in Chen Xian's body forced everyone to feel an extremely domineering and fierce force at that moment. At this time, they were so crazy, moving towards the back after taking several steps back, he finally managed to stand firm. Then, I saw him suddenly wave his hand towards the front, and then a long and vast momentum shot straight into the sky. A powerful force, directly forcing all the people, couldn't help but to wave like this one after another. After retreating back for a long time, he finally managed to stand firm. Then, the ice goddess was completely forced back. After seeing this scene, Chen Xian only had an indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth, and then he moved towards the ice goddess step by step, with the indifferent smile at the corner of his mouth. It is becoming more and more obvious. Although I don't know what your plans are now, I can tell you clearly that this place is now under my control. At this time, Chen Xian's face was gloomy and cold, and a faint murderous intent was completely released from Chen Xian's body almost at that moment. At this time, after the ice goddess saw this scene, a bit of fear flashed through her affection, and then she moved forward one after another. After taking several steps back, she barely managed to stand firm. "You, how dare you do this to me? You have to think clearly about what will happen to you in the end if you dare to offend me." The ice goddess's voice was trembling. It was obvious that the ice goddess' expression at this time was full of fear. At this time, after Chen Xian saw this scene, there was just an indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth, and then he gradually approached the Bing Xian saint step by step, with a cold breath. It was completely released almost in an instant. "Really? Now I want to know clearly, what can I do even if I offend you?" After Chen Xian finished speaking, an indifferent murderous intent was completely released, and a hanging power emerged from the void, spreading so completely and shrouding the ice on the body of the divine goddess. Suddenly, the atmosphere between the two sides became tense, as if the war was about to break out. At this moment, Lin Yu, Ye Lingyu, Lu Changqing and others arrived in front of the broken gate. At this time, after Lin Yu saw the broken door, a trace of complexity flashed across his expression. At this time, Lin Yu looked intently at the broken door in front of him, with a trace of disbelief flashing across his expression. At this moment, Lin Yu was gently rubbing his chin, with a slight smile on the corner of his mouth, and a rather playful look between his eyebrows. "Interesting, there seems to be something mysterious about these strange symbol textures carved on the broken door." At this time, Lin Yu was talking leisurely, and the faint smile at the corner of his mouth was even more obvious. At this time, after Ye Lingyu heard what Lin Yu said, a rare dignified expression flashed across his expression, and then he gently rubbed his chin. "A large part of the texture on this broken door seems to come from the lost country that was destroyed. The texture on the top seems to be a little unusual." After Ye Lingyu said this, not only Lin Yu, but even Lu Changqing couldn't help but fix his eyes on Ye Lingyu. His eyes were fixed on Ye Lingyu, and his expression was full of disbelief. "What? What else do you know?" At this time, Lu Changqing's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingyu. At this time, after Ye Lingyu heard Lu Changqing say this, he just turned his head and glanced up and down at him, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "What I know doesn't seem to have much to do with you." At this time, Ye Lingyu smiled like a flower, and the smile at the corner of his mouth was quite playful. After seeing this, Lu Changqing frowned and frowned. "No, what do you mean?" As soon as Lu Changqing finished speaking, Ye Lingyu's mouth curled up into a smile. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 800. What do I mean by this? Is it possible that you don't understand? Or are you deliberately pretending to be confused? Lingyu walked slowly towards Lu Changqing step by step. After seeing this scene, Lu Changqing's whole expression was filled with disbelief. At this time, Lu Changqing took a deep breath. He took a breath, and then subconsciously took a few steps back in the next second. "I'm sorry, young lady, I really don't understand what you mean. Please ask this young lady to clarify your confusion." Lu Changqing's face condensed and his expression tightened, and then he spoke in a leisurely and cold voice. Lin Yu seemed to have noticed that Changqing seemed a little strange, so at this time, Lin Yu coughed lightly, and then said in a cold voice, "Ahem, stop messing around. What's going on? Now it's clear. As long as these things are explained clearly, that's all. There's no need to be so complicated." At this time, Lin Yu just pulled forward and stood in front of the two of them, his expression even more indifferent. At this time, Lin Yu couldn't help but look stunned, and then a bit of murderous aura emerged from his body. The faint murderous intention spread quietly from Lin Yu's body. A mysterious aura and a faint coercion came towards him. Then, I saw a stream of churning aura around here heading straight towards the Tianmen, and then I saw a calm and vigorous aura, which quietly exploded in the void, almost in an instant. The distant and ethereal atmosphere in the scene was completely released at that moment. But in just the blink of an eye, the gloomy atmosphere around him instantly condensed into one. After seeing this scene, Lu Changqing, Lingyu and the rest of the people felt that Lingyu was a little strange, and then they heard a roar from Lingyu's mouth. "Since you're already here, why don't you show up quickly now? What are you waiting for?" At this time, Lingyu was deafening. After everyone heard what Lingyu said, they couldn't help but take several steps back. Only then did they manage to stabilize their bodies. Those people, they looked at each other in confusion, their eyes fixed on Linyu's body, and a rare dignity flashed through their expressions. A distant and vast aura spurted out like this, and then I saw a stream of powerful force, rushing straight to the sky gate at that moment, but it was only a moment, and then I saw the group has a far-reaching and vast atmosphere. Then, strange forces around here circled towards one place, entangled until the end, and condensed into one. An unprecedented power slowly took shape not far away from them, and then they saw a figure, and suddenly revealed his figure in front of everyone, and the look of that figure, there was a kind of indifference in it, and the indifferent murderous intention in his body forced everyone to tremble. At this moment, Linyu's eyes were fixed on the guy in front of him, and a rare dignity flashed through his whole expression. At this moment, Linyu half closed his eyes, and then he said this: "Take a deep breath. Who are you? Why do you keep trying to follow us?" At this time, Linyu's body showed a hint of murderous intent, and then his eyes widened with anger. And at this moment, after hearing what Linyu said, the man's lips curled up into an indifferent sneer, and then he shook his head. "Who am I? You don't need to worry about me now. I just want to tell you that if you don't want to die, it's best to retreat quickly. If you retreat now, you may still have a chance to survive your own life, but if you insist on going your own way, you will inevitably die in the end." At this time, the man's eyes were fixed on Linyu's body, and a vigorous energy was released from his body without reservation. The vigorous energy instantly snaked to above the void. At this time, after Linyu felt the aura of that person, his whole face turned ugly almost instantly. He subconsciously took a few steps back, and then his whole face was suddenly touched by that person. A powerful coercion invaded so violently. That man's eyes were fixed on Linyu at this moment, and the indifferent sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, Linyu took several steps back and finally managed to stand firm. At this time, he felt a surge of energy in his chest, and his whole body was full of energy. His face turned completely ugly almost at that moment. Linyu clutched his churning chest, and at this moment his expression condensed slightly. How is it possible? This power, this power. At this time, Lin Yu's expression flashed with a trace of helplessness, and his face flashed with a bit of indifference. At this moment, he took several steps back. Then, he saw the man slowly walking towards Lin Yu step by step. The slight sense of oppression on his body enveloped Lin Yu, forcing Lin Yu to the point where he didn't know what to do. Good. After Lin Yu saw this scene, he immediately began to realize that there might be something wrong with this matter. Lin Yu half squinted his eyes, and then he waved his hand casually, and then a powerful force emitted from his cuffs, soaring into the sky. A surging momentum was completely condensed almost at that moment, and then they saw that the space around the person in front of them was completely torn apart in almost an instant. At this time, Lin Yu's lips curved into a slight sneer, and then he shook his head. I originally thought you might have some abilities, but now it seems like nothing more than that. Now you are not what you are now. At this moment, a calm murderous intention emerged from Lin Yu's body, and that surging momentum made everyone's heart suddenly start to tremble.